Today we're going to explain a little about Wachovia's money laundering. First, there will be a brief explanation of the company's background, then details into the money laundering, along with how it was exposed. Next, we will discuss specific laws put into place to prevent this from happening, and lastly, we will talk about some of the consequences. First, let's look at Wachovia's background and how it is what it is today. Tracing its origin back to 1866, First National Bank of Salem with Israel Lash as president and owner was established. When Lash died in 1879, his nephew William closed the Salem location office and reopened the bank in Winston as Wachovia National Bank. In 1893, they opened their second office called Wachovia Loan and Trust Company. In 1910, Wachovia National Bank and Wachovia Loan and Trust Company merged, and they became the largest bank in the South and the largest trust operation between Baltimore and New Orleans. In 1985, Wachovia merged with First Atlantic Corporation to create First Wachovia Corporation with headquarters in Winston-Salem and Atlanta. In 1993, they were joined by South Carolina National. In 1997, they had their first major expansion through the Southeast, which consisted of First United Bank Corporation in Florida, Central Bank Fidelity Bank Incorporation, and Jefferson Bank Shares Incorporation in Virginia. They also had more than 800 bank offices and 1,100 automated teller machines throughout Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. In 2001, Wachovia Corporation merged with First Union Bank in Charlotte. In 2006, Wachovia was the fourth largest bank holding company after merging with South Trust Corporation. In 2007, Wachovia struggled during this crisis, but then in 2008, they almost lost all of their $24 billion in the third quarter. And in 2008, Wells Fargo beat out Citicorp and bought out Wells Fargo, or bought out.
Okay, so now I'll explain to you the details of the money laundering scheme. So Wachovia used these things known as CDCs or Casas de Cambios. And through these CDC, they were actually managed by and supervised by a business unit of Wachovia in the bank's Miami offices. And through these CDCs, people in Mexico can use hard currency and they can wire transfer the value of that currency to U.S. bank accounts to purchase items in the United States or other countries. And the nature of these CDCs, the CDC business allows money launderers the opportunity to move drug dollars that are in Mexico in the CDCs and ultimately into the U.S. banking system. And Wachovia used these CDCs by depositing money through the drug trafficking organization, but the drug trafficking organization was using false identities and then wired that money into Wachovia's correspondent bank accounts for the purchase of airplanes for drug trafficking use. And nearly 13 million went through these correspondent bank accounts at Wachovia for the purchase of, like I said, the aircrafts to be used in their illegal narcotics trades. And from these aircrafts, more than 20,000 kilograms of cocaine were seized. So I'll move on to now how it was exposed. So it was exposed by a guy named Martin Woods, and he joined Wachovia in February of 2005 as a senior anti-money laundering officer. And after a while, he noticed and identified a number of suspicious transactions relating to the CDCs in Mexico. And these traveler checks were marked with these sequential numbers for large amounts of money, more than really any innocent person would need, with inadequate or no identity information on them, and what seemed to be, to a trained eye, dubious signatures. After he found out about this, Woods issued a series of SARs trying to find out the name of these parties and where these checks were coming from. And this one senior U.S. manager in the Miami office of Wachovia, at which the Latin American business was centered, he called these reports defensive and undeserved. And after that, Woods came under a lot of pressure from the business. They tried to force him out, tried to basically fire him because they were catching on to their money laundering scheme. And he was right, because in April of 2006, soldiers from the Mexican military found 128 cases packed with 5.7 tons of cocaine valued at $100 million in the city of Carmen. And then March 12th of that year, the U.S. attorneys filed a case that charged Wachovia with the largest violation. But years after Woods found out about Wachovia and their money laundering scheme, he actually filed a suit for harassment and detrimental treatment because of the way Wachovia hung him out to dry and tried to make him look like he was the bad guy.
So the specific laws that were in place to prevent these money laundering scandals was the Bank Secrecy Act, which is also known as the Currency and Foreign Transactions Reporting Act. It was enacted on October 26, 1970, and it requires financial institutions to keep close tabs on suspicious transactions that could indicate money is being laundered from criminal enterprises. According to prosecutors, Wachovia's program that was responsible for enforcing the Bank Secrecy Act was woefully inadequate, and bank executives were fully aware of these inaccuracies. The consequences for the money laundering scandal: Wells Fargo agreed to pay $160 million in total to settle the accusations against them and Wachovia. $110 million was representing the proceeds of illegal narcotic sales laundered through the bank and were forfeited money. They also had to pay an additional $50 million fine to the U.S. Treasury. And under the agreement, Wells Fargo cannot use taxpayer money provided under the Federal Financial Bailout Program to pay its fine and forfeiture amounts. And consequences to the executives were that they will avoid criminal prosecution in return for the fine and significant improvements to its anti-money laundering program, which they later spend $42 million to improve the program.
In conclusion, because of Wachovia's lack of proper ethical and legal behavior, their reputation as a respectable financial institution was damaged, as well as millions of dollars in fines and penalties. Thank you for listening.